Hi, everyone. This is Shreya Patel. I am the Chief Policy and Privacy Officer at Michigan Health Information Network, or MiHIN. And today I am going to be just getting a little bit of a refresher on the conditions of participation for admissions, discharge, and transfer messages, or as we like to call them, ADT messages. And then just walking through a document and resource that we have put together in order to help the hospital community comply with the requirement, as well as help the provider community really determine how best to receive ADT messages. So I know that we have presented on this topic at the download just a couple months ago in November. So I'm not going to go into the specifics of the rule today, but just as a summary, this concerns a compliance period that is coming up on May 1st of 2021. So in just a little under a month, all Medicare and Medicaid participating hospitals, that includes psychiatric hospitals and critical access hospitals, will be required to send encounter notifications. So we like to use the term ADT messages in order to describe those encounter notifications, just because it's a little bit more descriptive. An encounter is when a patient's admitted, transferred, or discharged, and that's kind of like a commonly used term throughout the entire country. However, other states might use other terms. So again, a lot of times we might see the term encounter notifications or alerts or something similar like that, but we're really all talking about the same type of message. Now, CMS has been very broad and very general about the way that they want hospitals to comply with this requirement. Basically, they don't want entities to have the most perfect process or method in place for sending these messages, but they do want to make sure that these messages are getting to the providers of the patients that come to their hospitals. So that's really going to be the general purpose of it. Now, one thing that we thought was really interesting when the CMS conditions of participation were released is that it did allow hospitals to, in a way, delegate their responsibilities to an intermediary that could accommodate that exchange for them. So, for example, if a hospital was connected to a health information exchange or a health information network, and that intermediary, the HIE or the HIN, is connected to a wide range of recipients. So by that, it means that is that intermediary able to transmit those messages to a wide range of providers, then the hospital would likely meet the requirement just by being connected to the intermediary or utilizing the intermediary in that way. When we saw that, we realized that MiHIN is very much so an intermediary in the sense of that term. So for our hospital community, for anyone that is connected to us and kind of participates in our ADT use case, they're likely going to be completely compliant with conditions of participation. And because we knew that was true, we wanted to create this document that I'm sharing out on the screen and that I'm going to run through in a second, just in order to basically let the hospital community know that you don't need to really start from scratch for this initiative. Definitely look through all of the requirements and the content, make sure that your internal legal compliance teams really understand what is being asked and ensure that you feel comfortable meeting the requirements. But what we really want to do in this session, and then also just kind of moving forward once the compliance period starts, is we really want to be a resource, because what we think is really great is that the ADT use case really covers all of those basic requirements that are outlined in the regulation. And even further than that, because we do have such a robust statewide network, we think that we not only comply with the requirements, but we kind of go above and beyond. So if a hospital is subject to a CMS surveyor audit, they can kind of use this document as a starting point in order to say, yes, we comply, and this is why we comply. So I know that's a pretty long introduction, but with that being said, I'm just going to kind of start to scroll through this document and just walk through how your hospital system can use it, or if you're a provider, how you might be able to use this in order to really begin to receive some of those alerts. So just to get things started, we just have a title page here. It references the full text of the regulation if you want to go in and see that exact language. We also parse out a lot of pieces of the initial text later on in the document. Right here, we have the names of a few individuals across MiHIN who participated in what we call the Conditions of Participation Task Force. So here we have a variety of disciplines kind of represented on the task force. We had, someone from the business analyst team, from the integration team, from the community engagement side, as well as myself, and I'm kind of on the policy and the privacy side, so really looking at compliance. And we have a few different things that are in this document. The first thing that we have are going to be kind of general, frequently asked questions that are going to help hospitals really understand what the regulations say. So that's going to go through some of those basic pieces of information, like what is the regulation requiring of hospitals, what information must be in these encounter notifications, how long must it take for them to be sent after the message is created, who is entitled to kind of receive these messages, and so on and so forth. The second component is going to be general questions for providers. Now, again, a little bit of a caveat here is that this compliance period is really targeted at hospitals. It's not targeted at providers yet, but we really want to maximize the ADT use case and framework in the state of Michigan. And we don't want to just say, okay, hospitals have to send ADTs, but it doesn't matter if they're being received or not. And so for that reason, we have a little bit more information for providers so that they can understand how they can receive ADT messages if they're not currently receiving them, and if they're having any sort of trouble doing that, how they can work with us to fix that problem and make sure that they're receiving the pertinent information that they need on their patients. The third component is going to be a template for a hospital response to a CMS audit. So what we did is we basically created a little bit of a draft letter that hospitals could use as kind of like a jumping off point if CMS comes to their hospital and basically asks them how they're complying with this requirement. So the first thing that it walks through is it walks through that language that comes right out of the conditions of participation, and it says that in the conditions of participation itself, it says that hospitals can use an intermediary in order to facilitate this type of exchange, and that in line with that language, the hospital is participating in MiHIN's ADT use case. What we then do is we go ahead and we break out every single requirement in the conditions of participation and every single piece of guidance in the conditions of participation, and we basically attest that the MiHIN ADT use case either meets the requirement or aligns with the guidance. What we then have under that is going to be another document, which is basically an overview of MiHIN's ADT use case that's titled Adt Hub. This document is probably something that most of the hospitals that participate in the ADT use case are already familiar with. It is a combination of our use case summary, but our use case summary, and I guess I would also say components of our implementation guide, but at a higher level. But the other component that's really important is it talks about how the Michigan framework can expand and eventually move across state lines in the upcoming months and years, so that this framework won't only be limited to Michigan. It can be something that will accommodate interstate exchange in the future. And as we know, national interoperability is something that's very much so a priority. So you're going to see not only where the use case is today, but also where it could go in the future. And also we do have a lot of language on how the current use case has gone above and beyond the minimum requirements and has really gone above and beyond what it initially was in order to make the information much more meaningful. So again, just another really great resource as a refresher to those of you who might not have seen those materials in a while. And then lastly, it says Appendix A and Appendix B, which obviously isn't very descriptive, but those last two appendices are basically two lists. The first list is a list of all of the health systems that participate in the ADT use case, and then the second one is all of the hospitals that participate in the ADT use case. So I think there's about a list of like 30 to 40 health systems and then about 130 to 140 hospitals. So the reason that we included that is, one, not only to show that we're an intermediary that's connected to a wide range of recipients, but it's also just for the individuals that received this packet to see if they are actually covered under our framework, or maybe if they want to just reach out to us for a little bit more information. So with that being said, I'm just going to kind of quickly scroll through this. I know that I've already given a lot of information on what's going to be in each of these attachments, but again, here are those general frequently asked questions for hospital compliance. So like, what authority does CMS have to put these requirements in place? Who's subject to the rule? What are hospitals required to do? What's the standard of care that hospitals will be held to, which is reasonable effort? So then going hand in hand with that, what does reasonable effort mean? What information are hospitals required to send? Can hospitals send more than the minimum ADT information? When should the hospital send the ADT notification? What's the time frame? Is there a specific format? Who should the ADT messages be sent to? What happens when the patients express certain preferences? Can they use an intermediary? And then what can they expect from CMS surveyors? We then have the general questions for providers, which is going to be a lot shorter, but here we're really going to go through the steps for a primary care provider or post-acute care provider to begin receiving ADT messages if they don't already do so. And then we also talk about the possibility to use an alternative method for providers that are in the state of Michigan, but maybe even outside of the state of Michigan. So if your provider is in another state, how you can get that information to them. We then have that template for the hospital response to the CMS audit. So that's going to kind of look like a letter. But again, that references that language that I called out earlier. It also goes through all the requirements in this kind of crosswalk. So this is something that your organization might want to use yourselves just to check for compliance, but also something that we can help and support with. Then we have the overview of our ADT use case. So we talk about who MiHIN is, the background of the ADT Hub or ADT use case in Michigan. We have a few diagrams here. We talk about how we do routing for the ADT messages. We talk about statewide success and a claim. We talk about scalability and public health benefits. We even touch on how it could have been really utilized this year with COVID. And then we have some links to more information if that's required. And then lastly, we're going to get down to Appendix A and Appendix B. And so here are all the health systems participating in ADT Hub, and then here are all the hospitals. Now, when you are looking through this entire list, if you believe that you participate in our ADT use case and you're not listed here, please do feel free to reach out to us as soon as possible. We can get this document updated and then redistribute to all of our participant organizations. But again, the entire purpose of this presentation and this walkthrough is just to say that we really want to support the hospital community with compliance on this. This isn't something that you're going to need to start from scratch with. And, you know, we have this packet ready to go for you. So with that being said, I will probably end this presentation, but do know that you are free to reach out to me via email at shreya.patel@mihin.org. And you're also able to reach out to any other MiHIN contacts that you have if that's a little more convenient, and they can definitely make sure that the questions get routed to the appropriate resource. So thanks so much, and we look forward to helping you with this compliance period.